The library hold slip with my name and someone else's book. The hold slip was tucked into the crook of the return slot the way a note gets slid under a hotel door, meant for one person, resigned to be found by whoever is honest enough to bend down. I bent. The paper had the library's crest and the familiar blue stamp that makes dates look official. In the rectangle where they print your last name, mine was there. Mason. Under it, the book title didn't belong to me. A manual for small repairs. I hadn't placed a hold on anything with that kind of ambition in months. I turned the slip over. On the back, in pencil that had changed its mind twice, someone had written, "If you still fix things instead of performing, 640 second floor window table, J, bring a pencil." The library opened late on summer Tuesdays to please people who mistake patience for a hobby. It was Tuesday. My watch said 6:22. I'd walked in only to return a heavy book that had insisted on being complicated in public. I kept my toolkit in the print shop down the block. Mat cutter, bone folder, an odd number of blades I apologized to, and a habit of choosing borders that don't make photographs nervous. At home, Daniel would be coaxing sound out of a keyboard that thought it was Dacre. We've been together 5 years. We know where the pleasing spoons live and how to ask for a pause without rehearsing it. The second floor window table faces the Elm and the bus stop. It's where undergraduates bring laptops to look like they're thinking. It's where elderly men remember being younger than other people. A man sat there with a tote bag that had clearly done its time at charity concerts. He had set 2 pencils in parallel on the wood, as if he wanted the table to know how straight it could be. He didn't look up until my chair made a sound. His eyes were the kind that prefer honesty to introductions. "You're Mason," he said, "not a test so much as a ground wire." "Evan," I said, "but yes, that name has belonged to me long enough for librarians to trust it. And you're J." "Julian," he said, then added, "J makes it easier to hide if the city is feeling dramatic." He slid one pencil toward me. Not a fancy pen, not an attempt at antique, a real pencil, mid-sharpened, plain. "I would have written it in ink," he said, "but I wanted the note to have an eraser." "Why the book?" I asked. "Because it's the nearest accurate thing I could get the public to hand you," he said, "and because I wanted an excuse to ask you about the act you do with frames. I watched you talk a woman out of swallowing her family in an expensive boarder last week. It was the kindest thing I heard that day." He glanced at the elm outside. "I thought, maybe you'd have language for the kind of repair I need." I held the pencil and drew a dot on the back of the slip. "What sort of repair?" I said. "The kind you make when a word stops working but the person still does," he said. "I have a word that I've used for a decade. We didn't schedule its retirement. Now it keeps trying to be a memory instead of a meaning." "Which word?" I asked, and he smiled like someone who knows that spells are only as powerful as their pronunciation. "Home," he said. We looked out the window and let the elm pretend it knew anything about roofs. He pulled a small cloth-bound notebook from the tote and set it between us. On the first page, stamped calmly, were the words "Provisional Rules." Under them, in a hand that wasn't dramatic enough to be calligraphy and wasn't sloppy enough to be jazz. "Nostalgia can testify but not judge. If either of us says pause, we pause. No theatrical exits. If leaving is needed, leave. Kind beats clever. Choose seats with an exit in sight." "I write them down because the page isn't scared of being consistent," he said. "They work in town halls and in my kitchen. I figured they work here." I added a small 6th line in the corner, a habit I keep forgetting to apologize for. 6. If we become cowards, we say so in the present tense. Julian read it and nodded like a bolt that had finally decided to behave. "Do you still fix things?" he asked. I still try, I said. I learned to pay attention to breathing. Photographs shouldn't have to gasp. I tapped the slip. So, tell me your version of the word. He wrapped a thumb around his pencil and drew a tiny rectangle on the margin, a frame you couldn't force anything into. I lived with someone named Oliver for 10 years, he said. He is not an enemy. He is also not the future. For the last 6 months, we've been speaking as if everything we say must testify to that dual citizenship. It's exhausting to be a witness all the time. You invited me because I am not Oliver, I said. Not to be clever, but because sometimes accuracy is the simplest kindness. I invited you because I watched you convince a stranger not to punish a photograph with importance, he said. I wanted to know how you did that without making it an audition. I told her she could let air do some of the work, I said. I told her she didn't have to prove the picture mattered with a border. His shoulders set down a bag I couldn't see. Air has been busy lately, he said. Will you try an exercise? He split a page into 2 columns and wrote at the top of the left keep and at the top of the right avoid. 3 lines each, he said. No adjectives we have to carry the rest of the week. I wrote, keep the size of our dinners, keep the chair near the door, keep Daniel's way of saying, let's wait. Avoid always. Avoid letting jokes do the job of honesty. Avoid using memory as a gavel. He wrote quickly, folded the page as if sending a polite letter to a city clerk, and didn't ask to see mine. We went downstairs to the circulation desk because the book had quietly arrived in its bin like an employee who prefers early to notice. The librarian scanned, stamped, slid it forward. A manual for small repairs had the kind of cover that was trying too hard not to brag. Julian tucked it into his bag and said, "There's a bench by the fountain that makes room for thinking out loud. Will you sit for 10 minutes in the presence of unglamorous water?" Water is our genre, I said. We pour it before we argue. We sat. The fountain didn't perform, it practiced. The bench didn't need us to make it meaningful. Julian set our pencils on the slat and said, "I work on the city's planning team. My job is to translate between what residents think streets should do and what streets will tolerate without resentment. Lately, I keep writing the word home on forms that look allergic to it. I sell frames to people who need the form to behave," I said. "We can share allergies." He laughed, grateful without spectacle. Then his phone buzzed with a message a person gets when life has decided to call in a favor. He read it, closed his eyes, held up his left hand without drama and said, "Pause." We paused. A bus sighed like it had been running since weather was invented. A kid nearby asked his father if pigeons ever forget where not to be. The fountain kept reviewing this year's curriculum. When Julian opened his eyes, he said, "Oliver just texted home, and I don't know if he means the apartment or the noun." "What would you want it to mean?" I asked. "My grandmother's kitchen had 2 rules. Nobody performs gratitude. Everybody gets water," he said. "I want it to mean we still have those rules even if the table has different chairs." "Then reply water first," I said. "If you both pour, you'll know if there's a table left." He typed. A minute later his smile returned like a room where the light caught up with itself. He sent back 2 blue cup emojis and a thumbs up, he said. "It's the internet's way of validating." "I'll allow it," I said. We stood because benches make endings easier than rooms do. He asked if I walk in the direction of coffee or in the direction of trying to be virtuous. I said coffee. We went to the corner place that trusts wood to be honest and machines to sound as though they're proud to have jobs. We sat with the exit behind my left shoulder. The barista brought 2 glasses of water before we had proved we deserved them. What does Daniel think of these exercises you're collecting? Julian asked. He thinks I'm learning to put words away like tools, I said. He put a list on our fridge that says promises must fit in a jacket pocket. We're trying it until it teaches us something or until it refuses. Good list, he said. I'd like to copy it. He wrote it beside Rule 5 as if listing a safe right next to a fire extinguisher. We didn't plan to see each other again, and so of course we did. The next week he sent a photograph of a street sign that had been moved 2 feet so a wheelchair could pass, and the caption, "Small repairs count." I replied with a picture of a narrow mat surrounding a family photo, as if it meant we are not embarrassed by air. He sent a 3-second audio clip of a stoplight's hum, and I sent a video of my mother's walker wheels as she took 2 slow steps and said, "Doesn't burn anymore." He wrote also this holds, and I replied also this holds. It became our catechism for truths that didn't need to audition. If the narrative demanded a confession, here is where I'd ask for absolution for drinking coffee with a man who had recently retired a decade's worth of furniture. If it demanded a plot twist, here is where Daniel would burst into the cafe and invent a speech. Our life won't listen to that director. When I told Daniel about the book and the slip and the rules, he said, "Then pour," and set down 2 cups without checking whether I meant metaphor or practical. There was a lunch the 3 of us because there are some rooms that deserve to be introduced to each other. We met at a diner that believes people still exchange weather for consideration. We sat where we could see the door. We didn't talk around Oliver. Julian hadn't asked us to. Daniel brought a term he learned from sound checks, gain staging, and explained that you keep signals in a range that doesn't blow the speakers but doesn't disappear. That's how we avoid resentment, he said. Julian wrote the phrase down like it might want a home later. In the shop one afternoon, a woman brought in a diploma that had a reputation for making people decorate walls against their will. "If it goes in a heavy frame, my father will think I finally respect it," she said. I showed her a simple border left space around it. "This way you don't have to let the paper tell the room who you are," I said. She watched it settle into the mat and said, "You framed the time it took, not the brag." I added that to my list of phrases I want to outlive me. In July, the bus we were on stalled for 10 minutes longer than courtesy prefers. No one attempted to will it forward by complaining. Julian poured water into the 2 cups he had again decided were a ritual. A teenager across from us cried quietly. He handed him a 3rd cup the way someone hands you permission to remain just as you are while you get there. The boy drank. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. The hold slip went into the book when we finally remembered to check it out, and then quietly back into the world when someone else put the title on their list. We don't own the manual. We rent it from each other. Autumn arrived without asking the trees if they were ready. Julian sent a photograph of a crosswalk with a new curb cut. Captioned, "Kindness is often a slope." I replied with a mat around a postcard that said return like it meant everything and nothing in particular. "Do you think I'm ridiculous?" I asked Daniel while we counted forks because our sink had decided to teach us humility. Pencils and rules and receipts. "I think you're building a maintenance kit you can use when Spectacle applies for a job," he said. "I'm on the side of anything that gets the lights turned off gently." He put 2 glasses on the table. "Say the word." "Pause," I said, and we did. That night before he got home from a show that was louder than its wisdom, I went back to the library to return a manual for small repairs. The same librarian stamped the card with affection and the boredom that keeps a city from shouting. When I walked out, the return slot held another slip. Not my name. For J, I didn't take it. I left it for the person who deserves it. Back at the apartment, Daniel asked, "What did you fix today?" And I said, "A frame that forgot it was a frame." He laughed in the way love laughs when it's been given the good fork in a life that forgot those existed. We drank water because some rituals are worth having the same way a chair is worth having, so someone can sit while they choose to stay. If another hold slip arrives with someone else's name, we'll put 2 cups out and sit where we can see the exit and not pretend that makes us cowards. We'll let the room do its work. I keep the pencil from that first night in my pocket with the manual receipt. Pencils break, rules get smudged, cups crack, frames loosen. The list of things that remind us to be decent would be long if nobody were tired. So I keep it short. Pause before you say not fair, water before you argue, air around the moments that think they deserve frames too heavy for their spines, exit in sight, kindness above clever, and the simplest, which is also the most stubborn. Say it in the present tense before your courage pretends it had somewhere else to be.